Hello and welcome everyone to OurVentura TV. I'm Sandra Siepak. On today's show, our guest is Roy Schneider. He is an attorney here in Ventura County, and he specializes in estate planning, which is what we're going to discuss on today's show. Thank you so much, Roy, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
That's great. Estate planning is a very involved type thing for a lot of people. And I guess I want to kind of cover what estate planning is and what people would have to know more about.
Yes, well, estate planning is a concept.
Okay.
And it covers certain matters. It covers how you're going to transfer assets during your life,
Okay.
on your death, even after your death. It also covers what happens if you become incapacitated. Who's going to pay your bills? Who's going to run your business? Who's going to deal with your insurance company? So all that involves your estate plan.
Okay.
So people have to be aware of that.
And when you plan in the process of doing estate planning, I'm sure there's a lot of different things that come up, such as certainly leaving assets to children, having assets divided among family members, and who's in charge of all this. Let's start with that a little bit.
Well, those are good questions.
Okay.
And they deal a lot with the subject of family dynamics
Okay.
and family harmony. We have families today, unlike even 20 years ago, all different sizes and shapes. We have single parents.
Right.
We have more blended families than ever before.
Sure.
And it all involves some planning and thought to do with that.
Okay.
And who's going to get what, when, and where is important. One of the things we've learned that, and this is interesting, parents sometimes want to treat everybody equally. Maybe they have 3 children. Maybe they have one child that they've helped out more than others, and they think, here's a chance where I'll equalize things. It's a recipe for disaster. If their children don't get equal, it's a problem.
Okay.
So you need to think about that.
Okay.
If one child has a debt to the family, how are we going to handle that debt when the parent
Okay.
dies?
Okay.
So those are very important issues. And then who's going to handle everything if you become incapacitated or you pass away? Oftentimes it's a spouse, but if there is no spouse to do that, there's a question of who do you name? So many people just name their oldest kid,
Right.
who may not have the competence to handle financial affairs.
Right.
Plus the other kids who don't get named become upset. They want to argue about it. And what I've seen so many times is when the last parent dies, the children, even if they're in their 60s, revert back to their adolescence.
Okay.
There's sibling rivalries. Mom liked you best. How come you get the ring and I don't? How come you're in charge? We see it. So it's something that needs to be addressed.
So when that happens, what is the best course of action to take? And how do you know who to put in charge? Should it not be a family member then?
It's something we discuss.
Okay.
Something that needs to be a lot of consideration. I've become more and more of a fan of the private fiduciary.
Okay.
A lot of people don't have a large enough estate to have a bank or
Okay.
a trust company.
Sure.
But there's now a whole field of private fiduciaries. They're licensed, they're bonded, the courts approve of them, and they're more kind of touchy-feely than a bank might be.
Okay.
And they work very well.
And what exactly do they do?
They actually administer the estate. So
Oh,
they will
okay.
gather up the assets, pay the
Okay.
bills, and if there has to be support for a minor child, they handle all that.
So they can oversee, should a minor child be given assets,
And-
they
yes.
oversee that.
Right, and one of the issues with children, which is interesting, sometimes they will name an uncle.
Okay.
Okay, so assume you're the uncle.
Yeah.
And you're going to give the kid the money when they're like 22 and then
Right.
25.
Sure.
Well, as soon as the child's like 18, or as soon as they know they got money, they're going to be calling the uncle every day.
Okay.
I need money. Give me money. I want to buy a car. And eventually the uncle gets so sick of it, they just give the kid whatever they want.
I see.
And that's not what
Okay.
you want.
Right.
Private fiduciaries aren't going to do that. Banks for sure aren't going to do that. So those are things you have to think about, and you have to kind of know your kid.
And that's important because, you know, down the road, you do want your kids taken care of, but you want it done right too.
That's right, and that's why when you have minor children, you spread out the money. You're not going to
Okay.
give it to all of them at 18.
Right.
Because at 19 they're broke, right? No question. Think about when you were 18
Right.
and got a bunch of money.
Right.
So we spread it out. Maybe
Right.
22, they get some of the money and it's gone.
Okay.
And maybe at 26 they get some more and then that's gone pretty quickly.
Okay.
Maybe by the time they're 30, they realize maybe I should have hung on
Right.
to some of this. So those are all the planning things that go into this.
So are you ever too young to establish an estate plan?
Well, you
How
have to be
old
18.
do you have to be?
Well, you have to be 18.
Okay.
Okay, you have to be 18. But you're not too young because the estate plan also covers, again, I said incapacity or health care. And you could be a 20-year-old with not a lot of assets, but you could get hit by a car.
Okay.
And who's going to help make healthcare decisions? Who's going to talk to the doctors to get second opinions? You have to have an agent for that.
Right.
So certainly you should at least be doing the healthcare stuff.
Right.
As soon as you have any sort of assets at all,
Okay.
especially a house,
Yes.
some cars,
Right.
You should consider having actually a trust or a will
Okay.
to deal with how that's going to pass if something happened to you.
Right, because I would think many people think, oh, well, I'm in my 20s. I don't need this until, I'm retired or something. So that's why I'm asking if younger people need to consider an estate plan.
They do. They need to consider, at least for the health care and also the power of attorney. If they become incapacitated, even for a short time, they might have some bills that have to be paid. They got to make a car payment, or they have to deal with their insurance company because they got injured. Who's going to deal with that?
Okay,
So at least power of attorneys for young people.
I see. Okay. Does an attorney need to put an estate plan together?
People try to do it themselves.
Yes,
and
they
they
do.
often do it wrong.
Right.
And they don't know they did it wrong until it's too late.
Yeah.
So attorney, there are online things you can do to make your wills or trusts, but if you don't really understand what you're putting in the document, then it's not a very good plan.
Okay.
And actually we have found that some of these online services are not all that much cheaper.
Really?
And you definitely want to have an attorney at least explain things to you and go through the whole family harmony thing. Online, they don't discuss that. And the attorneys also help you transfer things. One of the problem people do who do it themselves, they don't transfer the assets to the trust.
Really?
And then the trust is useless.
Okay.
So it's important to transfer the cars, the real estate, your bank accounts, all the assets you have got to be owned by the trust.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Is it important to go over what you're going to leave people before something happens? Should you discuss this with family members?
That's a very good question, and that's very individual.
It is.
Sometimes it's worth discussing with everybody, so whatever upsetness there might be, they can deal with it while you're there.
Exactly.
As opposed to being surprised.
Right.
Other times, parents are very close to the
Quiet.
vest, and they don't want the kids to know what they're getting, what they have.
Okay.
And there's reasons for that, because I've seen a trend lately in parents who have a lot of money. They don't want to give it all to their kids. They don't want kids that are just trust fund babies. That's not what they want. So they will leave money to charity and leave the kids enough, and they don't necessarily want to discuss that with the kids. But some families, yep, let me tell you exactly what I have, and here's what you're all getting so you know.
Right, because some people may not want to discuss certain things, and yet other families are very open about it. I've seen it go both ways. And you're right, there may be some hard feelings down the road, so we're just wondering if that's the best way to go.
It's very individual.
Okay, many people will say, well, my kids get along, everybody's happy, everybody gets along terrifically, we don't have any problems, I don't need to worry. What do you say?
It's interesting, you should worry, because they may get along, and sometimes they get along famously, even after death, but when money is involved, it changes.
Okay.
Even over silly things. I've had cases where, the mom will come in and say, well, I don't need to make too much in my trust because I put little stickies on the stuff I want them to get.
Really?
Sally gets this, and Sam gets that, stickies. And then I'll get a call from one of the kids afterwards.
Okay.
Mom dies, and they'll say, I went to the house after the funeral, and I could swear the stickies were changed.
Really?
Yeah, because your sister got there first, and she moved the stickies around.
Okay.
So, it's...
So unless it's in writing, per se, it's not going to hold.
First come, first grab.
Okay.
And sometimes that
And that's what happens.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's often what happens, and it's very sad. Also, there's issues with children. This is a common situation, too. You may have somebody with a business, and one child is in the business, and the other child is not.
Okay.
It's sometimes a mistake to leave the business to both of them.
Really?
Because the one who's not involved, all they care about is coming by every week for their check.
Okay.
And the one working 80 hours a week is not going to be happy about that.
That's right.
So there's planning. You can get life insurance maybe to cover the one who doesn't get the business. But that is something that people don't pay attention to, and it's really important.
That's interesting too, yeah. Is there a checklist of items that you should definitely have for estate planning?
Well, the attorney that helps you draft it will usually give you a questionnaire which helps you organize yourself. You will usually get a book with all the stuff in there. But as far as the checklist goes, you want to make a personal financial statement.
Okay.
So it's clear all the stuff you have. Otherwise, people are going to banks and looking for things. You want to check your life insurance. You want to make sure your pension plan has the right beneficiaries named. And you want to look at your the life insurance, I said, all your assets, Who's going to be your fiduciary if you're incapacitated? Who's going to be your fiduciary when you pass away? Those are the kind of things you do in a checklist. And the attorneys usually help you come up with that.
Right. So that makes a big difference.
Huge. Otherwise, it's a mess. I mean, I tell people, just imagine you got run over leaving my office. Think about what that does to your family.
Right.
They don't even know where to begin.
Right.
You're giving a huge burden on them. And you can solve all your problems with a well-drafted estate plan.
Okay. What are some of the biggest mistakes that people make in estate planning? And I know there's got to be a few of them out there because there's usually something that goes awry, you know, and it doesn't really go well.
Some of the biggest mistakes concern not putting everything in the trust.
Okay.
And one of the examples we see a lot is you own a house and you will put it in a trust, you're diligent about that. 5, 6, 7 years later, you want to refinance. A lot of banks will require you to take it out of the trust. They don't want to make loans to trusts.
Is that right?
So they make you take it out, put it in your name,
Okay.
and people forget to put it back in a trust.
Okay.
That's a problem. Not updating the trust. You know, the estate tax situation has been so fluid, and it's always changing. Right now, it's, you know, you can have $11.4 million that you can give away tax-free. A couple almost $23 million. Well, a few years ago, it was, you know, $3 million that you could have. So it changes, and people planned their estate when it was lower, the estate tax exemption, but that doesn't work today because it's so high, the estate tax exemption, you don't need that.
Right.
So they don't update their trust. That's a big mistake.
Okay.
Or they just they have 4 kids and name them all trustees. So that's easy. That's awfully not
So
good.
then what happens in
They
that
all got to
case?
agree, and the majority rules.
But if they don't, what happens?
Well, if there's majority, then one feels left out.
Okay.
If it's 2 to 2, nothing happens. There's no decision.
Wow.
It makes it very difficult.
Healthcare directives are extremely important, I would assume.
Healthcare directives are important for a couple of reasons. One, they give you an opportunity to spell out your end-of-life decisions.
Okay.
I want to be artificially kept alive forever, and I've had clients that say that.
Is that right?
Yep.
Okay.
They're telling me they're going to cure death, and they want to be here.
Okay.
I tell them, well, good luck.
Yeah.
You know, with your 1,000-year-old body, you get a lot of
That's
fun.
true.
But most people, if I'm artificially, I don't want to be artificially kept alive, brain dead, and some religious people have certain requirements, and so we make sure that drafts. So end-of-life decisions is important, but also giving somebody your power of attorney to talk to doctors, get second opinions, look at your medical records.
Right.
If you can't. And even if you can, you might have a spouse, and if you
That's
called up
right.
your spouse's doctor and said, I think my wife or husband's acting a little weird, I want to talk to you, they will not talk to you unless you have one of these healthcare directives. So it's a very important document.
All right. So in closing, what would you give as far as advice to those who are considering doing an estate plan and are thinking, oh, I really don't need it, I just have a house, that's all I really have. Is that really something to still consider?
What you want to consider is avoiding probate.
Okay.
Probate is a court proceeding. Anybody who's been involved in courts know how awful that is.
Yes.
You're out of control. You're subject to the court's situation. It takes about a year.
Oh.
It's all public. So everybody will know what you're leaving to who.
Okay.
And if you've got some assets, your kids are going to get calls from the Ferrari salesman, and they're going to get calls from the yacht salesman, because everybody knows. And all your neighbors will see what you've had and who's getting what.
Right.
And it's subject to the court. It's miserable, and it's expensive.
Right.
Like in the court process, it's set by statute, what the attorneys get and the executors get. If you have $1 million estate, it's around $50,000 in the fees.
Right.
So that's even with a house, you don't want to go through that. And you don't want to put joint tenancy with your family. That's people often say, moms will say, I'm going to put my 2 kids as joint tenants. Well, one is there's some tax disadvantages to that. The other thing is that's a gift. You've got to file a gift tax return. But the worst thing is you may have the best kids in the world, but maybe they get into an accident and they take out a school bus. There's a $10 million judgment against them. You're going to lose your house.
Yeah.
So it's not a good idea to put your kids on with your house joint tenancy, even in the money, in your bank account, unless it's a small amount, because their creditors can get it, IRS can get it.
Right.
Those are things that...
So the bottom line is estate planning is something everyone should take a look at and definitely consider. Thank you so much, Roy Schneider. Could you share your website if viewers have any questions?
Sure. It's www.rstlegal.com.
Very good. Thank you so much, Roy Schneider, for being on the show with us today and sharing so much more information about estate planning. Everybody needs to take a look and see what they can do for their own family.
Yep. Thank you.
Good. Terrific. And thank you for joining us today on OurVentura TV. I'm Sandra Siepak. I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye, everyone.